So I've been working on a video about Bible code, but it takes a lot of research. I was hoping to get it released today, but it's going to be a little bit longer. Just couldn't get it done in time. So instead of that one, today I figured we'd go through a Jehovah's Witness article on how Jehovah's Witnesses are supposed to treat family members when they get disfellowshipped, especially children, because I get a lot of questions about what happens if a 10 or 11-year-old is disfellowshipped, considering they're encouraging kids as young as 8 to get baptized. Are they kicked out? What happens? So let's give this Jehovah's Witness article a read. Let's get into it. So how do Jehovah's Witnesses treat disfellowshipped family members? I've been saying this for a while, but Jehovah's Witnesses create this really strange dynamic between their members. Last time I said that, it was in reference to a strange dynamic between men and women, where you aren't allowed to be alone in a room, and definitely not alone in a car, with somebody of the opposite sex and of similar age. So a 70-year-old woman can be alone in a car or in a room with a 10-year-old boy. That's not a big deal, but a 40-year-old woman can't give a ride to a 20-year-old man, for example. They need chaperones. People who are dating aren't allowed to be alone at any point, ever, not once. And with the Pillowgate video I did a while back, we see they created that weird dynamic not just between men and women, but between men and women too. They're paranoid that their sexually repressed members are gonna go all sex nuts on each other and won't be able to contain themselves. In their defense, that's what happens when you try to completely shut down somebody's sex drive. I'm just saying. Anyways, I have this article here about the weird relationship dynamic they want to enforce between their members and disfellowshipped people. They'd prefer the relationship doesn't exist at all, even if it's between a mother and a son, even if it's with a 12-year-old kid and his parents, but they'll settle for completely ruining the relationship. So let's give the article a read. It's split into 4 main sections: how to treat expelled ones, in the immediate household, relatives not in the household, and benefits of being loyal to Jehovah. We'll take a look at each. The first paragraph says, the bond between family members can be very strong. This brings a test upon a Christian when a marriage mate, a child, a parent, or another close relative is disfellowshipped, or has disassociated himself from the congregation. How should loyal Christians treat such a relative? Does it make a difference if the person lives in your household? First, let us review what the Bible says on the subject, the principles of which apply equally to those who are disfellowshipped and to those who disassociate themselves. So this is actually a Kingdom Ministry article. When I was in it, they had these little 4-page things that all Jehovah's Witness publishers receive every month. I assume they still do these, but they used to go over the Kingdom Ministries on Wednesday nights, and it would be on serious subjects like this. Kind of a non-public facing thing that only proven and tested Jehovah's Witnesses have access to. Of course, now they have study versions and public versions of the Watchtower, so those have choice information in them too. Okay, let's read the section on how to treat expelled ones. It says, God's word commands Christians not to keep company or fellowship with a person who has been expelled from the congregation. Quit mixing in company with anyone called a brother that is a fornicator or a greedy person or an idolater or a reviler or a drunkard or an extortioner, not even eating with such a man, removing the wicked man from among yourselves. Jesus' words recorded at Matthew 18:17 also bear on the matter. Let the expelled one be to you just as a man of the nations and as a tax collector. Jesus' hearers well knew that the Jews of the day had no fraternization with Gentiles, and that they shunned tax collectors as outcasts. Jesus was thus instructing his followers not to associate with expelled ones. Interesting little bit there. According to them, Jesus shunned tax collectors. Should we shun tax collectors too? But for reference, he didn't shun tax collectors. He just treated them as outsiders. But yes, Jesus did say that. That's true. And 1 Corinthians said that too. But if you watched the John Cedars channel's breakdown of the Bible's position on shunning, you'd know exactly why what they're saying here is complete garbage. He did a really good expose on why the Watchtower Society is wrong about shunning. In the video, he points out that he went into the article he wrote not assuming anything about it. Obviously, we're all opposed to shunning, but it's possible the Bible actually supports it, whether it's wrong or not, which I felt was intellectually honest. If the Bible supported shunning, then it would just mean the the Bible was wrong too, not just Jehovah's Witnesses. So I was open to the idea that the Bible might support shunning. It's a fair position to have when diving into the research. And he still came out of it convinced that the Bible didn't support it. And I agree with him. The Bible doesn't support shunning at all. Here's a good example of why I don't think the Bible supports it. The religious leaders of the time, widely renowned as having the wrong interpretation about all kinds of things, were in a closed-off group. You weren't supposed to talk to outsiders, but Jesus did talk to outsiders, and he was revered for it. On multiple occasions, he had normal conversations with them, hung out with them, said we should treat them well. If we don't, how will we ever bring them into the cause? He caught some serious shit for it too from the religious leaders of the time. And about that Corinthians verse about not dining with an unbeliever, 1 Corinthians 5:11, it says, "Quit mixing in company with anyone called a brother that is a fornicator or a greedy person or an idolater or a reviler or a drunkard or an extortioner, not even dining with such a man." Ignoring the technicalities in that verse about being quote-unquote brothers, as in being part of the congregation or not, the congregation who received that letter took action accordingly and kicked somebody out. And in response to that, the next letter they sent to the Corinthians was sent to correct the actions. In the second letter to the Corinthians, chapter 2, verse 7, it says, "The punishment inflicted on him by the majority is sufficient. Now instead, you ought to forgive and comfort him, so that he will not be overwhelmed by excessive sorrow. I urge you, therefore, to reaffirm your love for him." He saw what they did. He saw how it hurt the guy. He saw how wrong it was. And he sent another letter to them telling them not to shun him. Embrace him. If God is love, then he would never endorse something like shunning. And the Bible writers saw that. But Jehovah's Witnesses completely ignore that verse, pretend it doesn't exist. The next part of this article is titled, "How to Treat Expelled Ones in the Immediate Household." It says, "Does this mean that Christians living in the same household with a disfellowshipped family member are to avoid talking to, eating with, and associating with that one as they go about their daily activities?" The Watchtower of April 15th, 1991, in the footnote on page 22 says, "If in a Christian's household there is a disfellowshipped relative, that one would still be part of the normal day-to-day household dealings and activities. Thus it would be left up to the members of the family to decide on the extent to which the disfellowshipped family member would be included when eating or engaging in other household activities. And yet, they would not want to give brothers with whom they associate the impression that everything is the same as it was before the disfellowshipping occurred." Wow! Jesus Christ! I mentioned that quote in one of my other videos. Notice the wording there. You can eat with them if you want, but if the elders don't see a change in how you treat the family member, then there are going to be problems. You need to prove your loyalty by treating your kid like shit. Imagine a 10-year-old kid forced to eat dinner in her room instead of at the dinner table with everybody else because they don't believe the same things about Jehovah that the family does. Treated like a piece of trash by your own family members. 10 years old. That's my daughter's age, Kylie. Not allowed to eat with them. Not allowed to be around them. Kylie's home now becomes a hostile environment. These kids' parents now criticize everything they say and do, if they talk to them at all. A perpetual 8-year case of the silent treatment. And they still aren't allowed to do things that Jehovah's Witnesses aren't allowed to do, like have friends, any friends, because the kids at the Kingdom Hall are shunning them, but they still have to live the life of a Jehovah's Witness even if they don't believe it anymore. So they simply aren't allowed to have friends at all. They aren't allowed to talk to anybody at all until they move out. It's cruel and unusual treatment. It's wrong. It's a violation of human rights, and it absolutely needs to stop. But honestly, usually, when the kid gets disfellowshipped, the parents just pawn them off on a non-Jehovah's Witness family member, an uncle or something. Send them to live with them instead of dealing with it themselves. I've seen that happen a billion times. Anybody who will take them, or nobody at all. I've seen them kicked out on the street. In one case, I saw Jehovah's Witness grandparents send a kid back to the father who molested them because the kid got disfellowshipped and they didn't want them in their house. Check this next bit out. It says, "This will mean changes in the spiritual fellowship that may have existed in the home. For example, if the husband is disfellowshipped, his wife and children will not be comfortable with him conducting a family Bible study or leading in Bible reading and prayer. If he wants to say a prayer, such as at mealtime, he has the right to do so in his own home, but they can silently offer their own prayers to God." Did you notice how they worded that? The family members will not be comfortable with him saying a prayer. They're telling people how to feel. So what they're saying here is that the husband is outside outside of their jurisdiction if he gets disfellowshipped. They don't want him saying prayers, but there's nothing they can do to stop him. But they still control the rest of the family, and they're telling them that his prayer doesn't count, so they should do their own. Imagine what that would be like. The father says a family prayer before dinner, and afterward, the rest of the family bows their heads and sits silently, praying to themselves, basically discarding his prayer, as though it didn't happen. They're outright telling people to start conflict with disfellowshipped people here. They're breaking down family relationships as much as they can. They're trying to put a wedge in and pry it apart. There's nothing okay about this. The next part says, quote, if a minor child living in the home is disfellowshipped, Christian parents are still responsible for his upbringing, end quote, which means they're still expected to bring him up as a Jehovah's Witness, even if he doesn't believe it anymore. Still bound to their rules. No outside friends, and since Jehovah's Witnesses are only allowed to date within the religion, that means no relationships at all until they move out, which, like I said a minute ago, is usually pretty soon after the disfellowshipping. Send them off to whoever will take them. As long as they aren't around the rest of the family, they don't care where they are. The next section is called Relatives Not in the Household. It quotes the April 15th Watchtower from 1988. It says, the situation is different if the disfellowshipped or disassociated one is a relative living outside the immediate family circle and home. It might be possible to have almost no contact at all with the relative. Even if there were some family matters requiring contact, it would certainly be kept to a minimum, in harmony with the divine injunction to quit mixing in company with anyone who is guilty of sinning unrepentantly. Loyal Christians should strive to avoid needless association with such a relative, even keeping business dealings to an absolute minimum. End quote. Okay, what if they aren't unrepentant? What if they didn't sin at all? What if they just stopped believing it? They don't care. Whatever it takes to tear the family apart. The final section is called Benefits of Being Loyal to Jehovah. Seriously, every time I hear the name Jehovah, I cringe so hard. It's the cringiest thing on the planet at this point. The article says, cooperating with the scriptural arrangement to disfellowship and shun unrepentant wrongdoers is beneficial. It preserves the cleanliness of the congregation and distinguishes us as upholders of the Bible's high moral standards. It protects us from corrupting influences. It also affords the wrongdoer an opportunity to benefit fully from the discipline received, which can help him to produce peaceable fruit, namely righteousness. And there's the point. They want to twist people's arms. Take something away that isn't theirs to take, the person's family. And notice what they said in the beginning there. Cooperating with the scriptural arrangement to disfellowship and shun unrepentant wrongdoers is beneficial. You guys have no idea how much that pisses me off. Well, maybe you do. But they called it a scriptural arrangement. It isn't scriptural, as proved by the John Cedars channel. I put a link to that video in the description and in a card in the corner if you guys want to check it out. So this is what it all comes down to. They want to force people back into their member roles by ripping their family away from them. And that is a violation of human rights if I've ever seen one. Article 18 and 20 of the UN Declaration of Human Rights. Oh yeah, but Jehovah's Witnesses think the UN is the great beast of Revelation, so it only makes sense that they wouldn't recognize what the UN thinks about human rights. Here's what Article 18 says. Everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. The right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom, either alone or in community with others and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. And Article 20 says, everyone has the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association. No one may be compelled to belong to an association. That seems pretty clear to me. Anyways, that's all I've got for you. Join my Discord, follow me on Patreon and all social media. Check out my science channel and my podcast. And check out the secret link of the day where I promote a smaller YouTuber. Thanks for watching, guys.